1, 2, 3. 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 3. 2, 3. 1, 1, hide. 1.
And we're live from the beautiful second floor break room at the Information Technology Department in Miami-Dade County, Florida. It's the ITD Photo Club monthly meeting for September 2019. I'm your host, Carlos Echenique, and I will be doing today's news, housekeeping, and a little beginner class, and to issue the next challenge, and to admonish the rest of you for not having participated in the previous ones, because you know what, this is how you learn. Anyway, hope you guys can make it. We're live on YouTube again for your benefit. And if you can't make it, you can always watch the rebroadcast as soon as the program is over. We are coming to you courtesy of the Information Technology Department, Miami-Dade County, and the fine folks there. And on with it. This camera retails for about $3,500 and can use the full range of Sony E-mount lenses for full frame. It can also use the crop sensor lenses, but you will be getting a crop image. Of course, the crop image on this camera is 20 megapixels. Fuji earlier this year announced their GFX 100, a 100 megapixel medium format digital monster, which is the camera you see in the image there. This is a medium format camera. The sensor is larger than 35 millimeters. The body only retails for $9,999. It takes 100 megapixel images. Are there bigger cameras than this? Yes, there are, but not at this price point. The next one up in this range would be a Hasselblad camera, somewhere in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, in 100 megapixels. And then there is the Phase 1 series of cameras, which are 150 megapixels, and rumor has it they're going to be introducing a 200, which costs as much as a BMW. Anyway, moving on with the news. Also, I forgot to mention that the rumor mills are abuzz that Canon and Nikon will be offering high megapixel count versions of their full frame mirrorless cameras as well. Canon is rumored to be releasing a 70 megapixel version of their R series camera, and Nikon is rumored to be releasing a 60 megapixel version of their Z series camera. Next piece of news is one of my favorite pieces of open source software, Raw Therapy, has been released. According to the manufacturer, new features include film negative tool for easily developing raw photographs of scanned film. So those of you that are still shooting film and scanning, this now has specialized tools for enhancing your scanned film RAWs. Okay? Support for reading rating systems tags from EXIF and XMP files shown in the file browser. So if you use another application to tag and score your images, it will be respected now in Raw Therapy. And hundreds of bug fixes, speed optimizations, and raw format support improvements. Okay? Now, it says this is an open source application, and if it doesn't support your camera, you can help by sending raw files to the good folks at https://raw.pixls.us. Okay? If you send them sample raw files of your camera brand, they will be able to add them to fine open source applications like this one and Darktable and a few others that exist for the photographer. Raw Therapy is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Little club housekeeping. Please join our mailing list. I have created mailing list for the club's use. Members will need to sign up. I cannot do this for you. Okay? Surf over to https://www.freelist.org/ITD Photo Club, all one word, and register today. All future emails will be going through this mailing list. You can run conversations in it. It's not a one-way list. It's a two-way communications list, and it's a great way to talk to the other members. Sign up now. Doesn't cost you a cent. It's going to be the way we're working forward to avoid any nastiness with using internal resources or privacy issues with Facebook. This is not affiliated with any large organization. It's an open source project. Other bits of news. This is just breaking news. This happened today. Today, the ITD Photo Club gallery space is now open for business. We have the entire east wall of the first floor past the security gates to exhibit our photographs. We will be holding quarterly exhibitions where the photographs will be up for display for everyone to see as they come in and out of the building. And also, if you want, they can be for sale for you. I have permission from the management for the photographers to sell the photographs. Any business transactions happens between you and the person interested in purchasing the photograph. The county has nothing to do with it. They're just simply providing us the wall space to exhibit. Okay? So that's up and operational. The first exhibit is my exhibit, Visions of Japan. And you are welcome to see it. That'll be running through December, where we will start planning for the next exhibit to be deployed in the middle of December. All right, so that's it, I think, for the news and housekeeping. So next up is the beginners class, and carrying on with our Camera Basics series, Camera Basics 6, we're going to be talking about autofocus. Okay, so most modern cameras have autofocus systems built in. You can switch them off and use manual focus. That is an option always available to you. Never forget that. Okay? The autofocus system in modern cameras enables the camera to quickly place the point of focus on the subject. This has allowed for faster snapshot photography and is generally much faster than the human reflexes can perform. So it's been a great boon to photographers, especially those of us that have weaker vision. Okay, the camera kind of does the job. Is it perfect? No. There's ways to fool it, and sometimes, depending on the system you're using, it can sometimes cause more problems than it's worth, depending on the situation you're in. There are cases where you may want to manually override the focus, because depending on your camera, some autofocus systems, especially in what they call continuous mode, may have the attention span of an Airedale. Okay, it's just par for the course. There are two technologies that you might hear in widespread use for autofocus systems. They are phase detection and contrast detection. We're going to go into that in a little bit. Okay, so this integral graphic I have up there explains how the difference between phase detection and contrast detection. So phase detection works by having the image split into, have a red and green channel that, using a series of micro lenses on the sensor, that splits the image into the main image and then a red channel and a green channel. And when all three of those images line up, the image comes into focus. Okay? Now, it tends to be extremely quick, and it's great for things like sports. Its drawback is it's not always 100% accurate. Now, the other method is contrast detection, where the camera moves the focus of the lens back and forth, sometimes past the point of focus, and then starts retracing itself. So it kind of hunts back and forth. It starts moving backwards and forwards, okay, until it finds the point of maximum contrast. This tends to be a lot more accurate than phase detection, but it can be a lot slower, especially in lenses that were designed for phase detection. Okay? Some lenses are designed for contrast detection, and some lenses are designed for phase detection. And in some cases, your camera can have both, and we're going to get to that in a second. So, modern DSLRs, the ones with the mirror, okay, use an autofocus sensor mounted below the main mirror. The main mirror will have kind of like a two-way mirror piece in the middle. It's a little hard to see. You can't see it because the mirror is in the way. And there's going to be a little secondary reflector that will drop down and shine the image, part of the image, onto the sensor array, the phase detection sensor array in the bottom of the camera. Now, if you put your DSLR into live view mode, like you're going to be shooting video, the mirror moves up out of the way to expose the sensor. At that point, the camera stops using phase detection and switches over to contrast detection. This is why when you're using a DSLR for photographs, you really want to use the viewfinder, okay? If you use the screen on the back of the camera to try and autofocus, you're using the slower autofocusing system, albeit more accurately, but it is slower, and it will be if you're shooting quickly, there's going to be a high likelihood that you're going to get some missed focus shots. Okay, so then don't use live view on your DSLR if you're taking photographs. You can use it for video because you have no choice, but for photographs, always use the optical viewfinder. Okay, now such is not the case with mirrorless cameras. Mirrorless cameras do not have that pesky mirror in the way, and in fact, most of the time have the sensor exposed. Their shutter mechanisms usually involve only one curtain that closes because it has to be open all the time for the sensor to gather information to transmit it to the electronic viewfinder. Now, originally, mirrorless cameras relied on contrast detect autofocus. This contrast detection basically went and, like I said, it would focus and hunt past the point of focus and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it found the point of focus, which meant early mirrorless cameras weren't as responsive as phase detect cameras DSLRs with phase detect that were much faster. Okay. However, as time progresses and engineers love to change things, and they managed to figure out how to embed phase detect cells onto the sensor itself. So now most modern mirrorless cameras have phase detection cells in the sensor itself. There are a couple of holdouts, but probably in their next iteration, they will incorporate that into their sensor design. Okay. Now, moving along, your camera display, regardless of whether it is a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, will always show the autofocus points. Now, how these points are shown varies depending on the technology used in the camera. Sometimes they are on DSLRs, it might be an etched glass insert underneath the pentaprism, which then uses LED lights to light up the point that comes into focus. With mirrorless cameras that have an electronic viewfinder, it's just a video overlay. Okay? Remember, these points are just for your information, are visible in the viewfinder. They are not visible on your image. Unless you put another camera up to your viewfinder to take a picture of it, kind of like what they did here. Now, The number of autofocus points determines what parts of the scene are being covered by the autofocus mechanism. Okay? Some cameras, especially the less expensive ones, have fewer autofocus points. Newer cameras have a lot more. The current king of the hill in autofocus points, well, is the Nikon Z7. But, and I have to preface this with this, Canon does have a technology, a contrast detection technology called dual pixel display, where their sensors literally have twice the number of pixels that they're advertising, because there's a whole nother set of pixels that are used just for contrast detection. So technically, on the contrast dual pixel cameras, they are using the entire sensor to do focus. But in this case, I'm talking about phase detection. So in the display you see there on the screen, that's the viewfinder from a Nikon Z7, which has 493 focus points. And fun fact, focus points always come in odd numbers in both the horizontal and vertical direction. Why? Because you need an exact center. Also because the Japanese hate even numbers. Anyway, by using odd numbers in both axes, you can have a focus point that is the exact middle of the camera. Middle of the viewfinder, rather. Sorry. And there's reasons for that. Okay? But like I said, the Z7 is the current king of the hill, covering 90% of the viewfinder in focus points. You can see the focus points will actually, you can actually make it pick a target that is in the foreground as opposed to picking the giant mountains. Because this gives you a lot of flexibility, especially with rear-mounted controls of the camera that will let you move the focus point around manually if you want to. Some cameras, like the Sonys, will let you do it with your finger on the display. Other cameras have a little joystick toggle, because sometimes that touchscreen display gets messages from your nose. Just saying. So I prefer the joystick under your thumb. That's my preferred method. You do what is best for you. Your mileage may vary. Okay? So, now, some people call these autofocus modes. I prefer to call it autofocus coverage, because autofocus literally has only two modes: single shot or continuous shot. I didn't even put a slide up for that. Single shot literally means that I'm going to press my button halfway, I focus, and then I'm ready to take a photograph. If the subject moves, I need to release the focus button and then press it again to reacquire focus. Okay? The other mode is continuous focus mode. As long as I'm half pressing the shutter release or whatever button I have assigned to do autofocus, because you can assign some of the rear buttons to do that and divorce it from the shutter release, the camera will continue to track the subject. Which subject? That depends on the camera brand you're using and how much money you paid for it, because the more you pay, the better the focus tracking you get. That's just the cruel reality of this world. Sony is quite famous for their eye autofocus, where the camera, when it sees a face, will acquire the person's eyes and focus on the eyes, which is great if you're taking portraits. Nikon has just recently done that for their Z series cameras, or Z for all you folks from across the pond. For the rest of the English-speaking world, the Z series camera with a firmware update. And truth be told, I've heard it's pretty good. Not quite at Sony levels, but hey, nothing that a firmware update can't fix. Okay? Anyway, on display here is what I call autofocus coverage, which is basically how you decide how many autofocus points you're going to use. Because like I said, sometimes, especially in continuous or tracking focus modes, your camera can have the attention span of an Airedale. And it might decide that instead of focusing on the birthday boy, it's going to focus on the dog jumping up in front. So that can lead to ire from the child's mother, especially if it was the scene right when he was blowing out the candles. So you need to test that with your camera. I can't tell you which ones are good and which ones are bad because it's whatever you have to learn to work with what you got. As I always say, if your camera stops doing what you need it to do, then it's time for you to look at getting a new camera. If your camera still does what you need it to do, you don't need to get a new camera. Okay? Anyway, the modes can go from full coverage using every autofocus point available to limited sets, to sets that are broken up into specific areas, even down to just a single point. Okay, like I said, full coverage, center weighted, where full coverage, which uses all the points that you have available. Center weighted, where the points in like the middle third of the screen, not from top to bottom, like in a circle in the middle third, are active. Zone, where the focus is divided into 3 areas, and if you're tracking, it'll try and keep the person. If the person tracks into one of the zones, it'll keep track of the person in that zone. So, and if they move from zone to zone, it'll jump and follow them, but it tries to kind of isolate them. This is good for when you're working like on people in crowd shots and you want to keep track of them. There is 9 point, where it will get a 3x3 matrix right in the middle of autofocus points. Sorry about that. Live show, no editing. Okay. And then down to single point. And you might say, well, why do you want single point? Doesn't that defeat the purpose of the autofocus? Yes and no. Even the Z7 with its whopping 493.90% coverage might end up picking something you didn't want to be in focus. It might end up focusing on something else, not necessarily what you wanted. One way to guarantee that that doesn't happen is to reduce the whole thing down to one autofocus point. If you're doing a portrait, put the point on the subject's eye, focus, hold your shutter release, don't let it go, and then recompose and take the shot. Classic technique called focus and recompose. Okay, duh. Anyway, this is one of the reasons why you use a single point. So that way you aim at the eye, half press, holding it, recompose the shot so you get proper composition, and then pop off the shot. Remember, in single focus, this is in single focus mode. If you do it in continuous focus mode, when you move, you're going to go and lose the focus acquisition because it's going to focus on whatever's under the point. Now, some cameras have a button on the back called AE lock. But that AE lock button will usually have a switch around it, but we'll turn it to an AF lock. The AF lock means if I'm in continuous mode and I don't want it to reacquire, I press and hold that button. So it starts to get to be a little bit of a contortion act. And you go and hold that down, and then you'll be able to use continuous focus, but it won't reacquire when you focus and recompose. So what some people do in those cases is they will reprogram, which some cameras will do, they will reprogram the button function so that the AF lock button instead will be doing autofocus. As long as you hold it down, especially in continuous, it will focus on the subject. The moment you let go, it will stay at whatever focus point at whatever point of focus it picked up last, and you can stop doing it, and then you can take the shot, because pressing the shutter release won't cause it to reacquire focus. So that's called back button autofocus, and that's an advanced technique, and it takes practice. If you want to do it, check the manual for your camera to see if the button can be reassigned. If the button can be reassigned, assign the AF controller, whichever one is convenient for your finger, as long as it doesn't take over a major function of your camera, and assign it to control the autofocus. Not the lock, the actual autofocus activation. And then practice with it in continuous and single focus mode so that it becomes second nature to you, so that you can acquire focus and then half press and then you can just press and take the shot. Okay? And in continuous mode, as long as you're holding it, it will focus, and then when you stop, it will stop moving, and then you can take the shot again. Okay? So that's something to think about. Again, it's a technique. You need to practice with it. to make sure that you are good, because this is not something that happens naturally. It's kind of it's an acquired skill. This doesn't mean to say that there aren't people who aren't born with this talent, and I hate them. So, that does it for this month's lesson. So, we're going to come up with challenge number 8. You all are about 4 challenges behind now, because some people have turned in the first 4 challenges. Monthly challenge number 8. This one's going to be a tough one. The decisive moment. Take a photograph in the style of Henri Cartier-Bresson, the father of modern street photography. Look him up. He had a gift for seeing things around him. This is going to require that you take your camera with you all the time. And you're going to see things happening all around you. The trick is to see them and capture the event. This is an expansion of your awareness. So you're aware of your surroundings because, as I've said many times before, beauty is all around you. You just have to see it. Well, things are happening all around you too. And sometimes the decisive moment happens before you even realize it. So you got to have your camera ready at all times. This is going to be a tough one. Doesn't need to be black and white, can be color or black and white, but you want to catch someone doing something. It's generally a candid photograph, doesn't need to be, but it always works out to be very interesting when you catch people doing interesting things. Didn't say naughty things. It's not paparazzi. It's catching them. There may be someone, like 3 people walking down a sidewalk, and then they're just in perfect position at this one moment, just to get ready to catch them. Or like I did in this sample, where the child is looking at me, and his grandfather is there, or the gentleman next to him, maybe it's his grandfather, I don't know, is taking a photo of him with his cell phone. It's a moment. A second later, it was gone. And that's what we want you to do. So that about does it for us this year, this month. Next month we will have we'll be at the normal time of the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and I'm sorry for this month's delay. I hope that you are enjoying these videos, either live or in recording. Please subscribe so you get notifications as to when the next live show is going to be. Please register with the mailing list so that you get your updates. And I'll put the links to all the links are going to be in the show notes on the channel for this episode later tonight. And I will be putting a link in there to my Patreon page because I do this, and any way that you can help contribute to me would help me continue to do these shows, and your support is totally appreciated. Hope you guys have a great time. Go out, take photographs, enjoy life, and capture the images, because sometimes those images will never return again. Take it easy and have a great night.